Hello, my name is Aston, and today we will be talking about perfect competition. Perfect competition is essentially where the market has all the conditions to operate perfectly competitively. Now, just because it has the name perfect doesn't mean that everyone is benefiting or everyone is maximizing their welfare. Perfect in this case just means that they have all the conditions to operate competitively. That's it. So now, perfect competition doesn't just mean that the market is competitive. They have to have three different assumptions or these three conditions to actually be perfectly competitive. So the first one is price takers. Now, a price taker basically means that the firm has to go with the market price. They can't change the market price. They can't go up, they can't go down. They can't undercut their competitors, and they can't overprice their products for quality or maybe because of brand loyalty. No, they cannot do that. And the only reason they can't do that is because of the next assumption, homogeneous products. Now, this is a very important assumption. Homogeneous essentially means the same, equal. So that means that consumers think all these products are indifferent to one another. They don't choose one over the other because they're all the same to them. They don't care where they get their carrots from. They're all the same. They're just carrots. They might be branded differently, but they're all the same. They're just carrots. So that's why homogeneous products, they basically remove brand loyalty, and they basically equalize the quality. So there's no way for these firms to kind of compete using non-price factors. The only way they can compete is through price, which is why the market price is very important. So once that market price is set and consumers know the market price, firms can't charge above that because then the consumers will just go to another firm. So in this case, you could say that both firms and consumers are price takers, which is very important because of the homogeneous products. Lastly, there is the free entry and exit of firms. Now, all these three assumptions are super important because without one another, perfect competition essentially falls apart. You can see markets where there are price takers and there are homogeneous products, but there's no free entry. And sometimes there are homogeneous products, but there is free entry, but then they're not price takers. That is essentially the perfect competition, and it's necessary. Now, the thing and the sad thing about perfect competition is that it only exists in theory. It doesn't exist anywhere else. The closest market we have is agriculture because, hey, there's price takers, there's homogeneous products, and but there is some kind of barrier to entry. You need a lot of land. So that's the reason why we can't really call it a perfect competitive market. Okay, first, before we move on to these graphs, let's start off with something smaller. This is the price curve, basically the demand, the price, the AR, and the MR curve for a perfectly competitive market. Why is it just a straight line, and why are there no labels, you might ask? Because I forgot to draw the labels, my bad. Price, quantity. Now, here's the thing. Like I said before, because the products are homogeneous and consumers and firms are both price takers, they cannot charge a higher price than the market price. Hence, their price will be completely inelastic. It'll be perfectly elastic in this case because if they charge higher than the market price, they get zero sales. But then you might be thinking, okay, well, why don't you just charge lower than the market price? See, here's the thing. The demand curve is also the same as the price curve, which is perfectly inelastic, right? Now, the thing is, why would you charge a lower price if you're selling all your inventory? Doesn't make sense, right? If you're charging $5 and selling all your inventory of $5,000, you're making $25,000 in cash. Okay, now what if I lowered it to $4,000? Okay, then I'm making $20,000 in cash. Same shit. I'm still selling all my inventory, just at a lower price. Why would I do that? Doesn't make sense. Okay, let me charge $6. How much do I sell? Zero. So they're forced to charge the same price of $5. You can't increase that price. If you reduce it, okay, go ahead, you're lost. There's no point in doing that. Only the consumers will gain, not you. And we know that an assumption of every firm is that they are profit maximizers. They will make more money if they can. There's no point in them making less money. Now, you might be thinking, okay, if that's the case, why is their MR the same as their AR? It doesn't make sense. So average revenue is essentially revenue divided by the price of the unit, right? That's why it's called average, or how much you've sold. So AR is essentially the demand. So because the demand is perfectly elastic, then we know the AR will also be perfectly elastic. But then the MR is the marginal revenue you sell. How could the marginal revenue be the same as the average revenue? Okay, see, here's the thing. When you sell each unit for the exact same price, that means that the price of the additional unit, or the revenue of the additional unit, is the same as the price, because you're selling each unit at the same price. So each unit is making the exact same revenue, which is why MR is also constant. That is also a key assumption. This goes back to them being a price taker. It all goes back to this. This is why these assumptions are super important. Okay. Like I said before, many firms does not equal perfect competition, because they can be colluding, they can be, so basically when you collude, essentially you're basically making the rules of the game. You're fixing things to your own benefit, and it is seen as anti-competitive behaviors. So that's why it can still be uncompetitive. In the same way, there could be very little firms in the market, but it could still be competitive, because if the demand is inelastic, then firms are competing with price. Same shit. Now, they could also be seeing inelastic demand, so their demand is like, basically, it varies like a normal, firm does see. But the thing is, they'll actually compete using non-price factors like quality or like brand loyalty. I would give you an example, but none come to my head with inelastic demand, really. So that's basically this down. There's something else I have to talk about over here. One moment. Nah, there's nothing else here. Okay, whatever. So now let's get on to these confusing curves. What the hell is this? Okay, first I want to say something. In the short run is basically where one variable has to be fixed. Okay, so it's like, usually it's less time in the long run, because in the long run all variables can be varied. So in the short run, you have to keep something fixed, because if you want to expand your operations, sometimes you can't do that because you're stuck with the land or the machinery, because of your contracts, or maybe because of your labor, because of contracts, and because maybe of the market conditions, you don't expand, which is why in the short run we say one variable is fixed. And in this case, perfectly competitive firms can make zero, they can make supernormal profits, or they can make losses in the short run. It's possible for them. Okay, so I'll give you a situation where they do make a loss. So as you can see, the price is set, they're making a profit here. So a price is set above their short run average total cost, and therefore they're making a profit in that little box of it over here. And another case over here, you can see they're making a loss because their short run average total cost is greater than their price. And boom, costs greater than the profit, cost greater than the revenue, negative profit, costs less than the revenue. Of course, they're making positive profits. Now, here's the thing. So, when you're making a profit, and because of the fucking free entry and exit, this causes an increase in the supply. So here's the issue, right? Essentially, because of the low barriers to entry or no barriers to entry, hit and run competition can exist. So here's what happens. Imagine, like I said, we're talking about carrots, right? Okay, hey, carrots are selling well. Everyone is selling their carrots at a good price, and they're all making profits because, there's no barriers to entry and exit. These firms, they just enter the market and they sell their own carrots, and then they make profits. So as more and more firms do this, the supply of carrots will eventually increase. And as you know, law of supply and demand, that'll cause the price to fall to P2. And eventually, that price will fall below the short-run average total cost. And because these cunts can exit the market for free, they'll just leave. Oh, hey, we're making a loss. Why would we stay here? Doesn't make sense. Let's just leave. And then a lot of firms leave the market. And then, of course, hey, the supply of carrots suddenly drops. oh, the price will go back up to P2. Hey, so now it's just a back and forth, back and forth. So essentially what happens is in the long run, we can say that these firms are making normal profits, or we can say zero economic profit, because their average total cost or long run average total cost will be equal to the price or the revenues or whatever, meaning they make absolutely nothing in economic profits. But do not get confused. Just because they're making zero economic profits does not mean that they're making no accounting profits. Because listen, why in the world would you become an entrepreneur if it wasn't for money? You want to become an entrepreneur because you want to make profit. That is the name of the game, profit. And you would not stay in the market if you're making zero profits. How would you pay your bills? How would you do anything if you're making zero profits? The reason why we say they make zero profits is because we talk about economic profits. There's always opportunity cost for every single action that these firms have, and which is why the economic profit for operating in a perfectly competitive market is seen as zero. They can still make accounting profits, but let me tell you a question. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that every single firm in a perfectly competitive market makes the same amount of profit? Like accounting profit? What? You said no? Well, you'd be correct, yeah. So now you might be asking, why? That's because of economic rent. Let me give you an example of economic rent. So let's just say two firms are buying land. One firm buys land on a river, and the other one just buys irregular old land. Now, firm one, who bought their land on a river, can save $1,000 in shipping costs, right? Now, you might think that $1,000 of shipping costs goes to economic profit, but no, that's called economic rent. Economic rent is essentially the reward for scarcity. That rent isn't free. That is essentially reflecting the market price. Imagine that other firms were competing for that land or that river in this case, right? Hey, we're saving $1,000 in shipping costs. That means that we can assume, or we can assume that the price of that river, of that land, would be $1,000 reflected in the market price. If we reflect the opportunities into market price, it'll be $1,000 extra or $1,000 flat, right? So that's why we call it economic rent. It's the reward for scarcity. It's the reward for how you not utilize, but essentially how the resource is used, of course. Now, if the other firms are competing for it, the price would go up, but you get the point. While economic profit is essentially your reward for efficiency. Economics is terrible subject. It's all about efficiency. That's what we talk about. I think deadweight loss exists. Deadweight loss and all this other stuff, all these other consequences exist because we're not being efficient. If we were all completely efficient, then we would all be maximizing our own surplus and everyone would be happy. That's basically what these guys think of it, but behavioral economics tells you a different story, but that's a rant for another day. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed Perfect Competition. One of my favorite topics, one of my favorite markets by far, and honestly it shows you what happens when everyone is operating in their own self-interested behavior. Now, will I be doing a shout out this video? No shout outs this video because of my own self-interested behavior. I don't want to shout anybody out today. Not feeling it. Bye bye.